Good afternoon, everyone. I am delighted to welcome you all to the Irish International Business Network's 4th virtual event. The IIBN connects Irish business professionals and entrepreneurs globally with chapters in New York, London, Dublin, Munster, and a presence in Central and Eastern Europe. We have members joining us today from all over the UK, most counties in Ireland, Moscow, New York, Dubai, Budapest, and Toronto also. And we would like to say a big thank you to our sponsors, Grant Thornton, Beecham, Dorsey and Whitney, Ovation Incentives, Lonsdale Capital Partners, KMCO Group, Spark Crowdfunding, Hannon Travel, EBRI, Channel Site, apologies, TPL and World Trade Center for their continued support. And lastly, for anybody who has any questions that they would like to ask the panelists, please do put them in the questions tab, and just to also add where you're from or what company you're from, because it's just always nice to know where the questions are coming from. So without further ado, I'd love to hand it over now to our presenter for the day, Enda Brady. Enda, you're very welcome and thank you.
Hello, good afternoon everyone, and a very warm welcome to our panel discussion on Ireland's cyber security challenges and Ireland's role in the global arena. Enda Brady is my name. I'm a Sky News correspondent. Over the years, I've interviewed many chief execs, prime ministers, leaders, opinion formers. I'm delighted to be hosting the panel discussion today. I'll be asking the questions. If you are watching and you have any questions you would like me to put to the panelists, please send them in. They will be coming directly to me and then I can ask them. So if there's something that you're interested in or you feel we haven't touched upon, just ask that question and I will certainly ask it for you. Now, I'll begin by getting each of the panelists to give a brief outline of who they are and to give their statement in terms of where they think Ireland is right now. And first of all, I'll call upon Andrew Fitzmaurice to go first.
And thank you very much and good afternoon, everybody. I think as I'm the first person, I'm going to try and sort of set the scene from what I would sort of view as the typical types of areas that you'd expect to find within a country which is moving towards mature cybersecurity and resilience. And first and foremost, the recognition of the threat that we pose from nation states, from serious organized crime and hackers. And we would expect that threat then to be manifested into a cybersecurity strategy that will meet those threats head on, have the policies and the implementation plans to underpin that, and also obviously the resources as well. Look at the sort of the culture of the society. Is it a society that uses the internet? Is it digitally enabled? What's its view of that? What's sort of the awareness within this society? And that's obviously backed up by cybersecurity and education. Does it have a framework? Is it teaching really at young ages in schools, getting people to be literate around the digital agenda and staying safe online? Does that translate into universities? And the big thing we look for isn't really about knowledge, it's about skills. Because lots of people have lots of good knowledge, but it's whether or not they can apply them into that environment. And of course, we need the big stick. There's no point having some really good processes and policies in place if you can't penalise people for not following the line. So what's the legislative framework like? What guidelines are, what regulations in place? Do people follow the rules? And lastly, standards. What standards has the country decided it wishes to address? What standards and operating norms does it want to have? Does it feel it wants to be a global player? And what technical standards is it going to bring in as a baseline to allow everybody within that organization and country to operate safely, but together at the same level? So that's where I sort of pitch it right at the beginning, say, you know, let's have a look at Ireland through all those lenses as we go through. You'll see my data go around. I'm the CEO of Templar Executives, and we specialise in developing national strategies and education around cybersecurity. We're an international company, but that's already gone through. So that's a very short and sort of pithy start to this, but hopefully through those 5 lenses, we can actually have a look and see how well Ireland is doing.
Thank you, Andrew. I'll call now on Jacky Fox.
Thanks very much, Enda, and good afternoon, everybody. My name is Jacky Fox. I'm the Managing Director in Accenture for Security in Ireland. I'm also the Vice Chair of Cyber Ireland, which is a group that the government put together to help industry, academia and government collaborate in order to enhance our cybersecurity posture in Ireland. And I'm also an adjunct lecturer in UCD on their Masters in Cybersecurity. Some of the challenges that I would like to explore with my fellow panelists this afternoon are around skills shortages and how we can address that as a nation. I also think that, you know, we are very fortunate in Ireland that we have a huge technology industry that's been going on for a long time here. And it is said that we have approximately 30% of EU data residing in Ireland, and about how we can protect that from a cybersecurity perspective, because it's an essential part of our economy here, and how we look at that. And I also would like to explore with everybody the idea of resilience, because as we know now, it's not a case of if we're going to get attacked or how people get attacked, it's when you get attacked. And I think a lot of focus in cybersecurity has moved now to resilience and how you recover from an attack. So that's what I'm hoping to discuss with the panelists today. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. I'll call now on Danny McCoy.
Thanks very much, Enda, and it is a great pleasure to talk to so many people. My name is Danny McCoy. I'm the CEO of IBEC, which is Ireland's largest business representative organisation. We've approximately 38 trade associations underneath us, so Technology Ireland will be one of those, Small Firms Association, right across the mix. My own background is an economist, and it's, with that hat on, I think I'd like to try and connect the two parts of my day job. First of all, Ireland's a standout economy in terms of being at the frontier of what is the intangible globalization. There's no country on earth that has more per capita balance sheets which are heavily intangible asset driven. We know in the last 10 years that the world has moved from having companies that were largely driven by tangible assets, oil and gas companies, General Electric and so on, to now being dominated by companies that have very little physical assets. And therefore cyber is the driver of value protection in so many ways, so that Ireland, I think, is a real test case of a nation state that actually has significant cybersecurity concerns. So I'd like to discuss from that angle today.
Thank you very much, Danny. And finally, our final panelist, Des Ryan, waiting patiently there in the wings. Des, just give us your opening statement, please, and a little bit about yourself.
So yeah, my name is Des Ryan. I'm the Director of Solutions for Microsoft in Ireland. So I lead the sales teams and the technical teams for Microsoft in Ireland. So we work with our enterprise customers, whether that's in public sector or in the private sector, to try and help them unlock potential through the adoption of our technologies. I think I would say in terms of this conversation, I think I'll probably bring more of the customer insights and what's actually happening on the ground. We've seen a huge increase in the pace at which technology is being adopted. Over the last 2 months in particular, we've seen, I think Satya Nadella said his line is, we've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation in 2 months. I think that's a fair reflection. And when you deploy technology rapidly like that, there is inherent risk. All of the benefit that you get from the deployment of the technology can be very quickly undone if you come under cyber attack. So I also lead Microsoft's security business in Ireland, and we've got a team that gets called in when a customer is under attack or has been attacked to help them recover.
Thanks, Des. Right, let's start with the questions. So anyone watching, if you've got questions of your own, please send them in and I will read them out as best as I can. But the first question goes to you, Andrew Fitzmaurice. We'll do it in this order. How do you judge where Ireland sits in relation to other mature countries on global cyber security landscape? Just where is Ireland right now? That's the first question, and that's to you, Andrew, and each of our panelists will answer it in turn. But Andrew, what's your opinion? Where is Ireland now?
Well, if we go back to thank you for the question. If you go back to the sort of 5 issues I was talking about, let's have a look at the cybersecurity strategy. And there's been some really good work done on that, indeed by one of the panelists. But then now we'd be looking to see how well is that actually being implemented across the piece. Ireland's very fortunate, as we heard, it's got a fantastic economy and it's got some really good tech companies working here. But does all that power and all that ability to be resilient in the marketplace flow down to the SMEs in Ireland, for instance? Is everybody able to operate from the same benchmarks? Is that approved? I mean, obviously there's lots of threats out there, and COVID-19 has brought out some really interesting threats. As we know, it's been a real opportunity and a real focus for those people who sadly would do harm when everybody's trying to pull together into COVID-19. And obviously the UK's London area has been slightly badly more hit, I would say, than others. There is that element of society, unfortunately, who will just try and capitalise upon it, not just inherent in the country, but also from abroad. So we have seen a real increase in attacks around really sort of preying upon people's compassion, i.e. charities coming up which people give to, people's fear around COVID, unfortunately buying quack types of cures off the internet, and indeed just curiosity, people wondering where COVID's got to and browsing. So that's been used quite extensively. And of course, people are there to make the big money, and the bigger companies attract that. So from a point of view of the SME market, we've seen a 3,000-fold increase in the activity from a group called Script Kiddies. And these are people who really are stuck at home, probably very computer literate, who are literally bored primarily and wanting to try out new things. It's very easy to purchase exploits only for a few dollars and give it a go. And so it's this element that we have seen a huge increase. And of course, they aren't going to go up against the big corporate players. They're more likely to go up against local SMEs. And for them, mindset, it's a victimless crime, but it obviously isn't for the organizations. So in terms of that sort of maturity and the recognition of the threats, how quickly is the implementation of the cybersecurity strategy enabling these smaller companies to look after themselves and do better and actually protect themselves against the incoming from outside? And that is the issue. It is a global problem. We're all connected by the internet, and every country needs the internet to do business. So you always have to look upon this as a global issue, as opposed to very much a local issue or a local problem. And I think that's part of the challenge, protecting against that range of people.
Thanks, Andrew. I want to bring in Jacky now. Jacky, you were heavily involved in writing Ireland's strategy. Where is the country now? How have we moved on, do you feel, since the time you wrote the strategy, and just where we are right now in the global landscape?
Okay, well, I think when you're trying to determine maturity, there's several things that I would look at, whether it's a country or an organization, when you go in to look at them, and you would look at what their strategy is, what's their ability to identify what's going on, how much monitoring they're doing, and what is their ability to recover from that. One of the things that we focused on when the strategy was being written here was looking at what other countries were doing and what were international standards like from EMEA. We looked at strategies from, I think, 34 different countries, looked at what other countries were doing. We looked at what we thought was good in those, what we thought was implementable in Ireland. And so I think we also took kind of information from lots of different stakeholder groups, and there was a public consultation involved as well. So there was a lot of really good ideas brought from lots of organisations, lots of individuals and lots of other countries into the Irish strategy. So it was put in place in December. So I think it's very early to start judging how well we're doing in relation to the strategy. But I think what was key in this strategy is that Ireland decided to put an implementation plan on the back of that, which a lot of countries didn't. So there's actually something there to measure success against. And when you look at other countries internationally who have done that measurement, now I know the UK did a measurement midway through their strategy to say, how are we getting on? And they looked and said, actually, we're probably not making as much progress as we thought we would like to. So we're going to revise and refocus and do some different areas. And I suspect that's what will happen in Ireland as well. I think from a point of view of resilience, the EU, with the NIS directive regulation that they put in, are very much trying to harmonise where everybody is at across the EU in our ability to respond to known threats and attacks. So, you know, I think we're doing quite well in the adoption of that as well in the country, you know, but again, it's early days, you know, so all efforts are going in, and I think maturity-wise, we're trying to harmonise.
Thanks, Jacky. I'll bring in Danny McCoy now. Danny, where do you see Ireland at the moment?
I'm certainly not an expert on this, but given all that I can observe and so on, the sheer scale and capital investment that's gone on from the private sector side in Ireland in the last number of years, I suspect that our infrastructure is struggling to be proportionate to the scale of assets that are under control, which would be a perfectly natural phenomenon in a physical world. So I'm just going on my hunch here that I would suspect that we have a lot to do in terms of investment in the security of our networks and structures. It was clear if you look at the headcount measure, our private sector has really dwarfed the public sector, and notwithstanding today when nearly 1 in 3 are effectively dependent, or nearly 2 in 3 are dependent on the state for their income with COVID-19. But you know, in the normal functioning of the Irish economy right up to the start of this year, we've had a real imbalance in our infrastructure, private versus public. And given I suspect the public piece can be, you know, in a system, if any part, public or private, is weakened, then that brings in its own inherent risks. So, as I said, it's my hunch that we might be disproportionately behind what we're trying to protect.
Thanks, Danny. I want to bring in Des Ryan now. Des, where do you think Ireland is at the moment?
So look, a couple of things I would say. One is the National Cybersecurity Strategy is it's a good initiative, and I applaud Jacky's contribution to it. A strategy is only as good as the money that goes behind it to implement it. So I think it's going to be very, very important that it gets funded appropriately so that it can the various measures can be implemented. That's the first thing I'd say on that strategy. In terms of Ireland, generally speaking, in security maturity, Microsoft did a piece of research at the very end of last year. It was launched just before COVID, and some interesting things came out of that. One being 65% of business decision makers are concerned about a cybersecurity attack. So there is a reason for that concern. I think that there is a skill shortage, and there is probably underinvestment across a number of our customers. And probably the biggest threat that I would say that we would face in terms of cybersecurity, notwithstanding the threat that comes from things like ransomware, the biggest threat is actually complacency and lack of cybersecurity awareness in the population generally.
Thanks, Des. There's one theme I want to pick up on here: skills shortages. Jacky's mentioned it, Des has mentioned it. I'll come to you now, Jacky. How bad a shortage is it in Ireland, and how do we address it? Because presumably, you know, it's going to take many years to get so many students through academia, through all of this. Technology is changing all the time. We've just heard that, you know, we're seeing 2 years worth of a technological jump in 2 months because of COVID. Jacky, how bad is the skills shortage in Ireland now, and what can we do to address it?
Well, I think one of the first things is that this is a global problem. Like there's predictions or estimates that we're short of about 1 million cybersecurity specialists globally at the moment, and you know we suffer that in Ireland as well. I think that from a point of view of addressing it, it's not just about specialists in this area. It's also about, you know, the citizen, like how we educate ourselves, how we educate the whole population. That falls straight into the business world. because if somebody knows how to protect their home network, how to protect their family, how to protect their own personal bank account, that set of knowledge is also going to translate into the business world. So I think there's a two-pronged thing. There's a need for more subject matter experts in the area, but there's also a need to uplift the education of the general population as well. I do think that, and that's part of what Cyber Ireland is working on, trying to, like, we've actually initiated a lot of new third level kind of courses in Ireland in order to train people or to retrain people. I think now is a great time, given that a lot of people have been furloughed, to look and say, well, actually, if there's a possibility that the career I had isn't going to resurrect again, maybe I could go into an area where there is scope for me to work in. It's one of those jobs that it doesn't really matter where you're sitting when you're actually doing it. And I think we do need to focus very much so on the technology and science kind of education at second level and right further back down as well. And I think there are lots of people who are currently working on these problems. Like, it's great to see computer science going on to our second level curriculum, with that coming out in the Leaving Cert. So there are some great initiatives, but we've a lot more to do in that space.
Thanks, Jacky. Bringing Andrew Fitzmaurice now. Andrew, skills shortages, how bad do you think it is?
Well, I have to echo everything Jacky said. There is a sort of a massive skills shortage globally, but she has quietly, from my perspective, also identified two different sorts of skills, really. You've got those out and out cyber security professionals who are helping develop and run SOCs and building networks, but then you do have the citizen, and we're very much promoting cyber security awareness for the citizen. And indeed, there's lots of just very simple things you can do to stay safe with very little amount of awareness. And also for business as well, everybody has residual risk, and part of that is a cyber risk. So just in businesses, for instance, do you give your employees when they arrive a proper induction about how to use your computer properly? Do you check they know actually how to use Microsoft and all the way? Do you check where they actually store data? Good line management practices as well around efficient movement of information really helps. And indeed, when you promote managers within organizations, do they understand the risks of managing more data, a lot more of it, and how do you actually address that? So a recent survey which we helped compile looked at, what does cybersecurity comprise in terms of people, processes, and culture? And we found actually around about 26% is knowledge around the IT and those really deep skilled people that you need for the IT. But the rest of it, the 74%, is all about people, processes, and getting the right culture within organizations to value information, for people to have clear desk policies, all the sort of stuff that you'd expect, recognizing a phishing link or a spear phishing link when it comes in and doing something about it. And it doesn't take a huge amount of education to move people up the security and resilience scale by a long way. So absolutely agree. There's a lot of things that the citizen can do for themselves, or the government can support the citizen doing for themselves to move this agenda forward, whilst education catches up. Last point I would make, big difference between knowledge and skills. So academically, you can learn about a lot of stuff, but how you actually apply it is really important. And we really support the idea of apprenticeships in this space. We think absolutely important to get people to get practical knowledge around how networks work, supporting IT departments. And it's that practical knowledge that actually saves us, rather than maybe just academic qualifications. So there's got to be that balance between the two.
Thank you, Andrew. Danny, I want to ask you just on the economic side of a skills shortage. Presumably, it's false economy from companies, because if they're not putting money into addressing the skills shortage, they will be eventually caught out, and it will affect them far greater financially, presumably.
Yeah. So look, just dealing with the platform around the moment. As an economy, we're dealing with COVID. So there's really three stages to this. You've got the reopening agenda, which is seizing my thought process this afternoon as I'm awaiting some indication from the government about their agenda here today. Next is the rebooting phase, and then there's a kind of the reimagining. And of course, in all three parts, I think this agenda should be there. How do we direct effective resources in the rebooting to reimagine where we need to go to that intangible economy and the future of work, which we know will be very heavily dependent upon a cyber secure economy and society. So really the contestable space right now is going to be that reboot phase. And so going into this crisis, only about 6-7 weeks ago, we had €1 billion of a surplus in our national training fund. And we couldn't spend it until we cut some other items of public expenditure due to the EU fiscal rules. We've got a window of opportunity now where those rules are actually in abeyance. And so the state can spend that money as it likes. But unfortunately, it's as it likes. It may not be on skills. And so the agenda and therefore the lobbying for this needs to take place right now, because the state will be under pressure to use any spare resources to the incomes of furloughed workers, which now we know is not going to be temporary, is going to be extended. And so Jacky's point's right about, I think people reflect on their careers and the vagrancies of careers that could be interrupted at any stage in the future by such events, to get them back in and to make sure the state actually puts the money in a multiplier effect, what might be described as intangible skills, as opposed to necessarily just physical construction type investment, which is also needed as well, but that they don't overly go back to an old-fashioned view of pump priming the economy.
Thanks, Danny. Des Ryan, your view on the skills shortages in Ireland right now?
Yeah, look, it's very real, and I agree with what's been said. It's not just unique to Ireland; it's a global issue. If I go back to the research that I mentioned that we launched in January, 69%, and this was specific to Ireland, so this is Irish businesses we were speaking to. 69% of the businesses that we spoke to were planning to increase their spend in security, and that was in people and in technologies. But 41% of them were reporting that they were finding it difficult to find staff, security staff. So it is real. And the way you framed the question to Danny a moment ago, is this going to cause us a bigger issue at some point, or cause them a bigger issue at some point? Absolutely is the answer to that question. Over 50% of the events that are triggered in a SOC are not looked at. They're not investigated partially because of skill shortages. And that means there are things that are going on, potential attacks going on that are not being captured and being defended appropriately. So this is a real problem, not just here, but globally.
Thank you, Des. Okay, questions are coming in from our viewers all the time, so I need to work through these. Thank you to everyone. Keep sending your questions in. I'm receiving them here. Simon Elliott has written from Denton's. What is the panel's view on the role of the Irish Data Protection Commissioner enabling and enforcing strong cyber security and resilience in Ireland? And do they think Helen Dixon is doing a good job on that? So the panel's view on the role of the Irish Data Protection Commissioner, are we doing enough to enforce strong cyber security and resilience? Jackie?
I'm not sure that it's a called out role of the Data Protection Commissioner to look at cyber resilience in Ireland. I think it's more around the protection of data. And I do think that actually GDPR has had a knock-on effect on cybersecurity and actually uplifting it, because a lot of organisations have spent time both training their staff as a result of it and also looking at their third-party organisations. Like, a lot of breaches tend to occur not because of you and your organisation's weaknesses, but because of weaknesses of other organisations that you're dealing with and that you're networked with. So I think data protection has actually done a lot to uplift cyber security postures for organisations in Ireland. And it would be my understanding that the responsibility of cybersecurity lies between the National Cybersecurity Centre, An Garda Síochána and the Defence Forces, and that it doesn't actually sit with Helen Dixon. So I wouldn't like to judge where she's at on it.
Okay, right, okay, I'll take that. Des Ryan, your view on that, and is Helen Dixon doing a good job?
So I agree with what Jackie is saying in terms of her remit, and I would also go back to my previous point about funding. So Ireland does have a huge amount of the EU's data housed here. We've got some very significant global organisations here. My question would be: is she being funded, or is her business being funded enough to be able to really police things? So I wouldn't criticise the work that she's doing anyway.
Okay, right, we've answered that. Thank you all. More questions coming in. Carmen Carpintero is watching us in Spain. Hola, Carmen. Your question is to the panel: what can we do to protect citizens and small businesses working from home? I'd like Andrew to answer this one.
Okay, so there is a lot you can do from that perspective. Obviously, people may be using their own devices when they've been sent home. So there's a whole sort of routine sort of around hygiene around your own devices, around ensuring that you've got the latest antivirus, that your operating system is up to date. We would always advocate you use a VPN, a virtual private network, if you are going to move into your own office environment and be able to operate and share information there. There's some really human stuff about working at home as well, and that is applying the same rigorous approach to your security policies that you would have naturally in your office at home, and to ensure that you don't make the same mistakes that you might do if you're just idly playing around on your computer at home. So always think about what links you're clicking on, ensuring that you've changed your password regularly, again, if you're using your own device. So there's a whole range of stuff out there, and many places and many cybersecurity operators are offering free advice around that on their websites. Indeed, we do as well, with little videos of how-to videos to actually help people work from home. So there is a lot of really good advice out there.
Thank you. I want to come back to Des Ryan on this as well, Des, just because of who you represent. What would you say to Carmen if she has concerns about small businesses from home using your software?
Yeah, so again, I agree with what Fitz has been saying there. There's definitely some things that are easy to kind of build into your routine. I think a couple of things I would say. One is the security posture that is implemented in an organization versus that of somebody, the individual citizen working at home, is very, very different. So if you are working remotely, or if an organization has got a large population working remotely, you know, the things that we would be looking out for are making sure that they are not using their personal devices to do that you know, corporate work, because you know we have seen again in that survey that we did that there has been previously, before COVID, an overflow between people working from home using their personal devices, because sometimes security restrictions make it easier for them to use their own personal device. So try and continue to use the corporate infrastructure. There is a lot of technology being adopted at pace, Zoom being a great example, and there's a whole flare up in the security implications of that. Take the time to understand the technology that you're using, and look into it before you deploy it.
Thanks, Des. Danny, anything to add on the issue of people being worried about cybersecurity at home at the moment? Because obviously so many people are working like this now.
Yeah, I guess different parts of the supply chain, if you like to put it in that terms, are at different levels of sophistication. So again, it's out of my competency here, but again, that must be a concern. You may be safe, but who you're passing on the information to may not, and so it's very difficult to know. In a trusted trader kind of fashion, you feel you've a better view over processes when you're agreeing in the normal B2B workplace scenario. But what, you know, can you have the same security that your supplier has good hygiene cyber-wise in a home context? So that there clearly must be weak links in the chain right now.
And more questions coming in all the time. This is for everyone, but I'll go to you next, Jacky. Martina Redmond is from Mid Europa Partners, and Martina asks, how are companies looking to protect themselves against the business interruption threat of cyber attacks? And she asks, are they taking out bespoke insurance policies, enhancing existing policies, or others? So how are companies protecting themselves against the business interruption threat, and are they taking out bespoke insurance? Jacky.
Okay, that's quite a tough question, because the variety that we're seeing there is absolutely huge, and I think it's something people are probably getting used to the terms that we use in relation to resilience and incident response, because they're being used in relation to the COVID crisis as well, about, you know, containment, eradication, all these sort of things. So a lot of it is about your preparedness, and whether you've got plans in place like business continuity plans to allow you to operate even if something hits you or some part of your network or some limb gets cut off somewhere, that you can still actually operate your core or critical services. So some of it is about identifying those, looking at what your critical assets are and protecting those. Where you cannot put in controls to protect those, then people will typically try and transfer the risk to something like insurance. We're seeing a lot of trends towards people taking insurance policies in recent years. And what we're also seeing is that insurers are putting in place constructs whereby before the insurance policy is put in place, they're actually doing a maturity evaluation of the organisation, which is impacting the premiums that people are paying. And they're also using specific incident responders who are qualified to go in and help them if in the event that something does happen, because we do see a lot of like unqualified or, you know, organisations trying to sort things out themselves when they don't really have the competencies to do that. So we're seeing insurers put a lot of constructs around making insurance work for organisations. So yes, I think there is quite a big uplift in insurance being taken to protect organisations.
Thanks, Jacky. I just want to bring in Andrew Fitzmaurice. Andrew, your take on that question?
I mean, it is a very interesting environment. Obviously, lots of companies did have business interruption insurance, but typically that's around the business continuity plan and incident management, and maybe actually dropping out only for a couple of days. But obviously, lots of cybersecurity principles for organisations are based around the geographical location they're in. And of course, what we've done is we send everybody home, or the majority of people home. So we've vastly extended that communication network. And I think you'll find that for maybe a longer period of time than we've already had, 6-7 weeks, it may go even further. So that has introduced a whole load of inherent risk, which I believe most insurance policies won't cover. Jacky's absolutely right. A lot of people have been trying to get more insurance around that. But the insurance companies have been setting the bar higher and higher from you can't self-assess on this. They are sending out experts to make sure that your company can deal with this. So I think this sort of length of downtime, or this length of incident that COVID-19 has introduced, probably will not be covered in the long term by current cyber insurance.
We can't see you, we can hear you, we got that answer. And Danny, I want to ask you, just on that same point, just talk me through what, you're back now with us, Andrew, but Danny, just run me through the economics of a cyber attack on an Irish business. I mean, spell out for our viewers just how devastating, what is the financial impact of it?
If you take as the metric, the GDP that is now in intangible assets, you know, given the scale of that, you would think that a cyber attack that was uniquely, you know, if such a thing could happen, that was uniquely within the borders of Ireland, could be a factor of X3 compared to most average EU member states. So I mean, that was my point at the start. If it is linear in terms of its impact, Ireland could be exposed at an order of magnitude much greater than other member states, and that's why, you know, we have to protect so many assets right now, corporate assets, given the kind of the growth. At an individual business, and it'd just be impossible. It's kind of how long is a piece of string, I suppose. But I do know that nationally we do have a very critical investment requirement, and so you might argue that our investment should be X3 as well compared to other jurisdictions.
I just want to get Des's view on this as well. Des, the business world, how expensive is it? I mean, people taking out extra insurance policies and the potential for a cyber attack. Like, what are business people saying to you? You with me, Des? I'm not sure Des is hearing me at the moment. No, Des isn't.
One of the most high-profile attacks I am here.
Yep, keep going.
I can hear you. I
Yeah.
can. Can you hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Can you hear me?
Yep, got you, Des.
Seem to have lost audio. Okay, so one of the most high-profile attacks recently was the Travelex one, the Travelex one in the UK. There have been others. There have been others locally. Their parent company, Finabler, the stock price for them dropped from over 200, I think it's still $220 down to 91 in the space of over the space of a few weeks. The impact of a cyber attack, particularly the more recent ransomware attacks, is devastating. It is absolutely devastating to these organizations. So it is important that things like cyber insurance are put in place where they can. That is expensive, as the previous panelists have said. So this is a real threat, and unfortunately, we are seeing attacks locally of similar scale.
Okay, next question coming in. Going to go to Jacky Fox with this one. How can we embed a cybersecurity culture into organizations?
I've done a lot of work with different organizations to try and help staff to understand cybersecurity, understand the threats and risks. And I usually take kind of a multi-layered approach, because there's things that are generic to everybody, but then there's also things that are very specific to maybe departments or individuals who have certain roles within that. So it's about kind of making things seem real to people. I also find that training only has a certain shelf life. Like if you do a simulated phishing attack with an organization and train everybody to look for the things that might bring a phishing email to your attention so you don't click on things, that only lasts for a couple of months. So we've done quite a bit of research around this, and you can see after about 3 months that heightened awareness starts to drop off, so you have to repeat it. So you need to repeat a lot of that training to get it through to people. And again, I think personalizing it for people, speaking about their own personal systems and their children and their mother and their, it does help people to get that heightened awareness. So I would say often and short bites so that you get people's attention tends to work best at trying to get people to understand. Now, I would say also, I do think that technology has a long way to go to protect humans from making mistakes that bring cybersecurity attacks into their organizations. Like typically we would see, way over 50%, upwards of 75, sometimes even 90% of attacks start with a human unfortunately clicking something, and we need to get our technology to come up to date to protect the humans from doing that and allow them to operate properly as well. So it's not all about training. There's other things that we need to do to make things better too.
Okay, I want to bring in Andrew. Andrew, your take on embedding a cybersecurity culture in organizations?
Well, for us, it really starts with the board. Cybersecurity and the cultures is for us really much a leadership issue. And the board has to grasp this and endorse it and live it and breathe it themselves and set that example right at the top. We would look for somebody at board level to be made responsible for the overall program of creating this culture and moving it forward. Somebody would call like the senior information risk owner. And then ensure there's the right governance throughout the organization where people are trained to take responsibility for the critical information assets which they own and they use to make the business work. And in terms of communications, absolutely, the internal comms element is really important. It's allied to training, just to keep the posters going, keep people refreshed. Jacky's absolutely right. One study that we go to, actually, Jacky's even more pessimistic. It says that the persistence of learning is only 6 weeks within an organization, within the human. So again, it's absolutely keeping those messages flowing. Actually, from the board, making sure that all the people who work for this company or for the organization are valued. So maybe send out the latest security settings for LinkedIn, for Facebook, give advice around social media, ensuring that there's a really good set of policies to back this up as well, a really good acceptable use policy so people know what the rules are in terms of using their own provided information technology, what they should be saying. So that actually goes into the culture. Because Jacky says, the human needs to protect the information. Technology often does a really good job at that. But, if you take somebody down the pub and you buy them a large glass of Guinness and then start asking them about their company, that can be just as effective as any malware put into a system, actually eliciting information. So keeping that culture, keeping that awareness is absolutely key.
Thanks, Andrew. Des, I just want your take on this from the business perspective. In terms of cyber security culture, where are we in Ireland? I mean, is it in the front of people's minds, or do we need to sharpen up on this?
Without question, we need to sharpen up. Again, I agree with the previous speakers, and I'll go back to the research that we did. It's on our website if you want to read the detail of it. But the research we did showed that over 50% of end user employees had no security awareness training in the last 12 months. So that, as an indicator, is that it's not front of mind for the organizations that we're talking to. And again, as Jacky has said, most attacks start with a compromised user of some kind. So the first line of defense is going to be your humans, your own people. So you need to be talking to them about security very regularly.
I want to bring in Danny. Danny, your take on how difficult it is or not to embed a culture in an organization?
Yeah, I suppose just from our own experience, IBEC itself, as I said, maybe it starts with 240 employees, and it may sound very negative, but it certainly works for me. The more pain you give people, the better. It's like touching the electric fence, you know, you know, when you have that OFM, that OF moment when you keep getting caught by your own IT team, it starts to get through, and although it's very annoying, it actually, I think, works. So it's a bit of a negative way. I shouldn't be saying this on Workplace Wellbeing Day, but I think a little bit of torture is what's required.
Tough love. I've got a question specifically for Jacky, and then I've got a more broader question. Jacky, Paul Doyle wants to ask you, what level of maturity in security are you seeing across Irish companies in Ireland? Is it linked to general data and digital maturity?
Good question on the linkage bit. We're actually seeing in Ireland now, we did a global survey in Accenture recently on the state of cyber resilience, and believe it or not, Ireland's cybersecurity CISOs and practitioners came out top globally. So like, we were really happy to see that. So in general, the maturity in Ireland, I agree with what Fitz was saying earlier, that you know, boards are beginning to take this a lot more seriously in Ireland, and it is permeating down through the organisation. So I think we're actually doing quite a good job. I think, you know, the message about the importance of the data we're holding in Ireland and how important that is to our economy, people get it. You know we need to protect this stuff. And then would I relate cyber security maturity to how well people are utilizing their data in an organization? I think I probably would, because if people are utilizing data and kind of doing a lot of data analytics and data analysis, the likelihood is that they're also coming up against the risks. They're looking at, you know, are we using this data properly? What's the risk of this data being leaked? What's the risk of us having data protection issues in the manner we're using the data? So they're going to be doing a lot of analysis, which, you know, the last thing anybody who values data in their organization wants is a breach. So they're going to try and protect themselves from that. So I think I would correlate the two, high data usage and analytics and high cyber maturity. Yeah, I would. Yeah.
Okay, we have 10 minutes left. Keep the questions coming. The next question is from Laura in London, and I'm going to get Andrew to start with this. What do the panel think the timescales are for Ireland Inc. to be fit for purpose from a cyber security point of view to protect critical foreign investment? Andrew.
Well, that's a question with probably with a very interesting answer. I see Jacky laughing there. You've got a fantastic strategy, you've got goals to be met, you've got actions for 2020, and all these do need to come into play and to be realised. As other speakers already said, you do need to resource the implementation plans to move them forward. But I can't emphasise enough about getting the right culture and getting the right awareness in place to value information and to look after it. And levels of information, normally with the maturity models, they're normally built around 5. And level 1 is about being legal. So there's an element there, when you can see that you're having no data breaches under GDPR, then that's a fantastic view. The second level is obviously you've got programs running and you're starting to see the benefits. And level 3 for most organizations is where you want to be, where you've identified all your critical information assets that are helping the business and the organization's work, but you're also protecting them and being able to exploit them. And when you get to that stage, then you get to a very good working level of maturity, where as a business and a country, you can thrive. Now, typically, we look probably for a year for each level to move forward. And that's the reason why most cybersecurity strategies are 3 to 5 years in duration and have an endpoint where they hope to reach a point where they have attained a good level of cyber maturity. The trick is actually not being able to just obtain it, but to maintain it. And that, for most organizations, all the way from SMEs through to countries, is the most difficult issue. Getting there, but then keeping the impetus, keeping the investment, being agile to the changes in technology, digital transformation, and changes in the threats, which often change regularly, then that is the real trick, and that is the difficult thing to do. So getting to a level of maturity, not too bad. Maintaining it, really quite difficult.
Thank you, Andrew. I want to bring in Des Ryan now. Des, your take on that?
I would, again, I agree completely. It's the difficulty is technology changes rapidly, and with that, the threats change rapidly. And so we might never get to the point where we maintain that level of maturity.
And Danny, if you could just give me your view on that, the timescales. Are we close to fit for purpose, or should we just always be worried?
Oh, I think it's constant vigilance on this one, and I don't think we'd ever, in a fast changing, and particularly with intangible assets, one of the features of intangibility, I think, gives rise to the fact that you can never be absolutely sure at any given moment in time. Unlike more tangible assets, you can go out there, spot them, measure them, etc. So constant vigilance.
Vigilance. Another question coming in. I'll come back up to Jacky now. This is from Fiona Murphy at Cyber Women Ireland. Do we need to rebrand cybersecurity roles to open the door to diverse and skilled people? Job descriptions, unconscious biases, club mentality can act as barriers to entry.
Yeah, it's a problem that is cited often, and it's something that I see. Typically, only 10% to maybe 12% of people working in the cybersecurity industry are actually female. So we're missing out on a lot of talent in the world in the sector. Some of the problems go back to, second level education, kind of, conditioning, the type of things that are offered to people kind of going up along the way. Some of it goes towards, the branding, a lot of it is quite military language, attack, defend, and things which don't necessarily appeal to women and some sectors of society. I think that at the end of the day, the job is the job. And if you're interested in science and you're interested in dealing with real business problems for people and trying to help organizations, and make the world a better place, basically, by decreasing cyber threat in all sorts of different ways, it's a good place to get into, and it's a great career. So I think getting over some of that, like kind of, ignoring some of the language and getting in there is actually what people should try and do at the moment, with a view to over time changing that. So yes, I think there's a lot that could be done to attract more women and more diversity into cybersecurity. Absolutely.
Same question to Des. Do we need to rebrand it then, basically?
Yeah, I don't think it's restricted to just cybersecurity. I think it's a technology in general has this issue, and so Microsoft's certainly doing an awful lot to try and reach out to earlier in their people, or earlier in their education, to try and stimulate interest in STEM to hopefully increase the numbers of diverse candidates coming through. But yeah, there's definitely work for us all to do here.
Okay, I've got a question. I just want to ask the panel, so we've got 5 minutes left now. From a media point of view, how damaging internationally for Ireland's reputation would it be if we had, say, a big multinational company based in Dublin and some cyber criminals have seen Ireland as the Achilles heel of getting into that company? How damaging would it be for Ireland Inc. if that were to happen? And I'm going to start with Danny McCoy on that one, please.
Yeah, so you know, again, matter of degree, but hugely significant, because, as I said, we're a frontier economy in this changing world, and so our corporate balance sheet per capita dwarfs any other jurisdiction globally. So therefore, the sensitivity for a world that's looking on to say, well, why is it in Ireland? So rationales put forward, usually it's tax, or it's talent, or it's geographical positioning, all of those factors. But if you can't actually secure the asset, then that's kind of a foundational problem. So I think huge is the answer. And
Andrew, your take on that? You with us, Andrew?
Yeah. Yes, I'm just getting the mute to work. Catastrophic is the answer. I mean, there is absolutely no doubt about it. As younger generation come forward, and you know, half the world's population under 30, they're all influenced by social media. And if there's a bad run on social media, and Ireland's at the forefront of that, that's going to stay in everybody's minds. And just to give you an example, I mean, HMRC had a breach in 2007. They lost 25 million child support records. You Google HMRC, and it's the first thing that comes up 13 years later. And it doesn't matter if they fly, it doesn't matter if they fly people to the moon, it doesn't matter if they cure cancer. That is what they're going to be remembered for. So bad news in today's modern society hangs around forever.
Okay, another question. We're coming towards the end now. What is the panel's opinion of responding to threats of ransomware? I'll go to Jacky with that one, please.
That is a really challenging question, because all the advice from any law enforcement agency is do not pay, never pay. You're just encouraging it. You're going to make more of it happen. However, there are situations where an organization finds themselves that they weren't well prepared for it, and they have no resilience whatsoever, and they can't operate. So like if you're in like the current situation, if you're a hospital and you get attacked by ransomware and people are going to die, and you think that you can spend your way out of this, paying the money doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to solve the problem, but I can understand why people would do this. I think the best thing organizations can do is prepare in advance and make sure that they've got the resilience built in, and that's part of what we're trying to do, like kind of with critical national infrastructure and with the regulation that's in place in Europe, to make sure people are actually prepared. Make sure that you've got someone on speed dial as well, you know, if something like this happens to you, so that it gets dealt with properly and quickly. But I think to pay or not to pay, I would try and urge organizations not to pay unless the risk, you know, kind of is something that kind of, it isn't about just being offline for a few days.
Same question to Des, please.
I'm party to this conversation more than I would like to be. So Microsoft's position is do not pay the ransom. Reason being that typically the attackers have been in the environment for a period of time. Even if you pay the ransom, it does not mean that you aren't going to be attacked the second time, and it's probably going to cost you almost as much to remediate your environment to lock it down again as it is in paying the ransom. One thing we advise customers to do is to make that decision before they come under attack, because when you're under attack and in the heat of the moment, you're not thinking straight. So make that part of the strategy, the cybersecurity strategy for the organization. And then make sure you're doing things, as Jacky said, make sure you're able to recover or know who to call. So we've got the DART team, the detection and response team that flies into these kinds of scenarios. So knowing who to call is also important. But our position, don't pay.
Thanks, Des. Danny, what's your view of responding to threats of ransomware?
Well, I just agree with Des. I mean, again, we not to the same extent, obviously, that I'm sure that Des is, but I've often had members in this scenario, and it is, if you wouldn't do it in the physical world with your physical assets, why would you do it in cyber? So you must, and it would help everybody collectively. You know that this fear of reputation and embarrassment or whatever, the more we call this out, the more credible it becomes. The business won't pay. That's the time it will stop. If we don't do it, it will continue on and impact on everybody.
Just tell me, Jacky, you wrote the strategy on all of this. Can I just ask, as a journalist perspective, why did we as a country only start taking this seriously in December 2019? I mean, we didn't have a strategy prior to December, did we?
We did, and this is the second strategy. So there was a strategy in place for the previous 5 years. So I wouldn't say that we weren't taking it kind of seriously. You know, I think everything is always competing for funds, you know, kind of within a country. And the previous strategy actually allowed us to set up the National Cybersecurity Centre and our National Incident Response, and connect out to other European countries and kind of get ourselves into the global cyber ecosystem. I suppose it's a journey, and why are we not going faster on the journey? I suppose it's a matter of competing funds, and it's about bringing it up into the public arena so that people understand how important it is and how much we should be investing on it. I would say in the local, the recent kind of elections that went past, I wonder how many people, when somebody knocked on the door, said, what are we doing about our national cybersecurity strategy, you know, and how many we were talking about, you know, other very valid concerns about, you know, people not having houses and, you know, jobs and all that sort of thing. So I suppose funding has to be, you know, competed for, and that's just it. Like I would love to see more funding behind it, more happening, you know, kind of the strategy being implemented faster, but, you know, that's my opinion. So.
We've got a question from Wayne, who is in South Africa. Wayne works for Cohesion Global. He asks, what is the current mindset of the execs within companies regarding crisis management and the involvement of C-suite? Many push it into the CISO or CTO, but in fact it is ultimately involved in broader C-suite, as in the event of a breach or incident, depending on severity, it involves operations, HR, marketing, etc. I'll go to Andrew with that to begin with, please.
Okay, so this is a very important point. So many times we heard the board turn around and said, "Oh, IT will deal with that, the CISO will deal with that," but actually it is a board level response. And I think it comes back to education of boards to understand that cybersecurity now is just part of everyday business. It's absolutely integrated into every element of your business, in your procurement contracts, in your operations day to day, within HR, within the financial systems that you run. And therefore, if you do have some form of cybersecurity attack, the chances are it's going to affect your whole business. And therefore, it needs a whole team response. And the executive of every organization should be on this and understand it. And of course, user experts around it, if it's an IT element, or your experts around a business continuity that you might have. But it's definitely a C-suite problem. And if we take back to TalkTalk, for instance, when the chief executive appeared on television and didn't know what encryption was and didn't know where her client data was set, TalkTalk's share price fell through the floor. If it just, because it was obvious to all and sundry that TalkTalk's C-suite had not got a grasp of really what was happening and was going on, and that share price still hasn't really recovered. So it's absolutely vital that the C-suite understand what the impact of a cybersecurity attack will be on the whole of the business and treat it as a threat to the whole of the business and not just maybe to the IT department.
Okay, Jacky raised her hand there. Jacky, do you want to come in on that point as well, please?
Yeah, you know, I do an awful lot of incident response work with organizations, and it's my experience that every single incident response I have been involved in has had the board in it. They absolutely get on board with it. They really want to know what's happening, and in fact, actually, sometimes you have to kind of put a conduit in, saying, actually, we're only going to talk to you once an hour because we're trying to fix this at the moment. We also, I think it's really helpful if they've had training, you know, so that both the board and the exec get cyber simulation training. It makes a massive difference when something happens if they actually understand the steps of what happens and how you go through an incident and how it's resolved, and you know, the different phases. It makes a huge difference. So, but I think boards are doing that. Like, we definitely will be interacting with a lot of organisations and doing that at the moment. So I'd be very supportive of how boards and execs in Ireland, from what I'm seeing on the ground, are handling that at the moment.
Okay, I want to bring Des in on that point as well. Des, your view?
Is that C-suite and board are absolutely involved when the crisis hits. Prior to that, it might be delegated to the technology people, but when crisis hits, absolutely, it's C-suite and board.
Okay, Danny, what have you made of the conversation today, just from an economic viewpoint? Do you think that the message has got across the companies just how vital having a response and being prepared for it is in advance of an attack?
Yeah, I guess from the start of the conversation today, I came with a rather macro view, and as you can see, this goes all the way through the organization, you know, right down to that. If everybody in the organization isn't aware, then the organization isn't aware. It can't be for a select group. It has to be everybody involved, and if anybody isn't, then everybody's exposed. So it's just a bit like the vaccination and the virus we're dealing with. We're all in it together.
And remember, anyone watching, you can keep sending us questions. One issue I want to raise, so we're in the middle of this pandemic. Governments everywhere will be strapped for cash this year, next year, possibly for the next decade or more. My question would be, who's going to put cash into all of this? I mean, cybersecurity, if we're struggling, and it's the final question, I just want each panel members' succinct response to this. You know, are you worried now, as we're in the middle of COVID-19, that our government, the British government, European Union governments, people around the world will just be looking at their cash and what they don't have in their budget, and that cybersecurity may be something that gets pushed to one side? And I'll go to Andrew first with this.
Okay, so thank you for the question. I think actually this whole COVID-19 has been very good for cybersecurity. Ironically, something good's going to come out of this. I think the extension to home working, the need to utilise the internet, the need to utilise technology to keep business going, has really flagged up how important it really is. And indeed, I think that governments, large organisations, especially as everybody's saying that COVID-19 could come back, or a form of it could come back, so we could find ourselves working in the same environment. I think there's going to be a lot of investment with what little cash they have left to ensure that they can keep operating at a good level as we go forward, because this pandemic has really woken us up to a 1 in 100-year event could happen again in a couple of years' time. And I think there's a whole lesson to be learned. But in terms of technology, in terms of people utilizing technology, in terms of business keeping going, cybersecurity has been the mainstay for most businesses to be able to operate effectively under the current conditions.
I want to bring in Des Ryan now. That was the final question. And Des, your response to it, are you worried?
No. So look, I think what's going to happen is a lot of things are going to change in terms of the technology that's used in an organization. You know, if we stay in a kind of a remote working environment, people are going to have to invest a little bit more in the infrastructure to support that. I think if there is a continued recession, anything that helps connect people to organizations, to their customers, will be invested in. So I just think it'll be a reshuffle of where the investment will be. I'm not expecting that security will be compromised through this. I kind of sit with Fitz here. I think if anything, it might actually support the security story.
Thanks, Des. To Danny now. That was your final question. Danny, are you concerned that governments will trim back on cybersecurity?
I think those who are ignorant of the threats probably will, and that will be a real false economy. I think those who can know where the future is going will invest significantly. But that's the case in every shock to a business community. There are those who retreat and those who rush into the new world with a bit of bravery. So it'll be a mixed bag.
Thank you, Danny. And finally, Jacky, your opinion on that?
I think that there will be, in relation to our critical national infrastructure, which to date has been standing up well in Ireland, you know, with everything that's been going on, I think that we will see renewed interest in that. I think national broadband is going to become very important in Ireland, and I think that's quite closely tied to cybersecurity. And from an economic perspective, it's really important that if people are going to be working from home for a very long time, that they've got reliable broadband kind of in wherever they are in the country. I think that one thing that we have seen throughout this crisis is people's willingness to help and get involved, and the mountains that have been moved very quickly in, you know, what would normally take two years kind of, you know, to do has been done in 2 weeks in some organizations. And I think you might see similar things happening with cybersecurity as well. I do think that people who've done things quite quickly in order to facilitate working from home do need to do a little bit of a look back and say, well, have we introduced risks into an organization? Do we need to look at that again? But I think people are aware of that. So I think that what has happened we have to go back and look at the security element of some of the decisions that have been taken. And my view would be that organizations and government are doing that from what I see on the ground.
Okay, thank you, Jacky. So that was our final question. I want to thank all of our panelists today for your time, for your expertise, and to everyone watching who sent questions in, thank you, and to IIBN for having us here today. Hope you all enjoyed the discussion. It has certainly been informative from my point of view, and I hope you've all taken something from it too. So see you all again sometime soon, no doubt, hopefully in person when all this is past. So stay safe and slán live.
Yes, thank you very much, everyone. Really appreciate it. Just quickly on our IIBN events that we have coming up, there's a pipeline of events in place, so do check out our website. There's one coming up next Wednesday, for example, with Keenan Connor, but we also have one on the 4th of June with Ronan Dunn, who is EVP and CEO of Verizon. So for all of you that have an interest in technology and communications, I know that would be one of interest to you. And for all those people who are new to IIBN, please come and check us out. Drop me an email, fiona@iibn.com, if you have any questions. I'd love to talk to you. And to our panel and everybody, thank you all so much, and really enjoyed the conversation today, and thank you so much. Hope you all have a lovely bank holiday weekend. Take care.
Bye, guys.
Bye-bye. Bye-bye. Thank you.